alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a special guest, an unusual kind of guest for this show. Welcome to the podcast, John Adamus.
Tim, it is wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's great to have you. Honestly, we've had a few conversations in the past because you are a writing coach, correct?
Yes, I am indeed.
Yeah, and so tell the listeners a little bit about what a writing coach does exactly. Because not many people, even other writers, are necessarily familiar with that role.
Okay, so there's a couple different ways I can explain this, Tim. I'm going to give you two. First, you know how when your sink clogs or the fridge stops working and you call a professional who deals with very specific parts that you really don't, you could, I guess if you wanted to YouTube it and Amazon some things, you could make a show of it yourself trying to fix your sink or fix your fridge. But it's often easier to call in a professional who's got the experience, who gets you better results faster with less fuss. That's kind of like what a writing coach does. Here's the other way I often explain it. If you're the sort of person who goes to a gym and you can totally work out, you can get in shape, you can improve the quality of your life, you can gain flexibility, you can rehab injury, you can do a ton of things all by yourself. And it's totally fine, and loads of people do, and that's great, and more power to them. But if you were somebody who needed support, if you were somebody who needed training, wanted to make sure you were doing it correctly, you wanted somebody to help encourage you or motivate you or tell you exactly how to use that one scary looking machine, you might engage with a personal trainer. A writing coach is essentially, or can be, a personal trainer for your writing. It's somebody who can be accountable, who can motivate you, who can explain something to you, who can walk you through how to do a book launch, who can help you market your thing, who can help your sales copy, who can straighten out why chapter 8 seems to be the thing nobody likes. There are loads of different elements of writing that a writing coach can assist you with. So it's a combination sort of specific craftsman, but also the personal trainer. It's the hybrid of those two roles in a creative way that allows you to put your best story forward.
Well, nice. Yeah. And actually, I mean, I think that's a good explanation. Obviously, I had a little bit of understanding of it in advance because having been a victim of writing coaching, not a victim, wrong word. Anyway, or maybe the right word. So, so as a writing coach, you work with clients and people like me even, who you need the tool tips and stuff to help the doctoring kind of stuff too.
It's the way I often phrase it to people is like the A team. If you have a problem and you can't seem to find anyone else to help, and if you can find me, which I'm pretty easy to find on purpose, you can hire me and I will work with anybody on whatever their problem is. Whether it's give me 20 minutes and we'll just talk. Give me half an hour and we'll talk. Give me an hour. Give me several hours and let's get very specific about this one line and how do I make this work, or a query letter, or what's this thing in publishing do, or how do I read this and make sense of this? It is designed, my whole role is designed to work with a writer to get them from where they are to where they want to be. Whatever that might be for them, so long as they can explain it. I talk to a lot of people who they know they want to be successful, and then the description sort of trails off after that. They just want to be successful, whether that means they want to sell well, or they want to get published, or they want to finish their manuscript, or they want to sell 5,000 copies, or they want to have 6 books made, or whatever. Knowing your end goal, no matter where you are, no matter who you are, no matter how far into that process you are, makes it infinitely easier to work with somebody like me, because that way, if we know where we're going, we can figure out how best to get there.
Nice. Yeah, and very succinct, actually, compared to the way I was stumbling through it. So great. So as an example, though, what kind of stuff have you helped a client with recently? Or what's been one of your bigger challenges recently? Names omitted, of course.
Sure. No, that's no problem. I'll omit names. For example, I worked this morning. We're recording this in the afternoon, not to spoil the illusion of the internet, but I worked this morning with a woman who has been working very, very, very hard on trying to get the dialogue in her entire book to sound like people and not sound like they're melodramatic people in a Lifetime movie and not sound like they're very specifically blocky or stilted. They want to sound natural. And so we have spent 1, 2, 3 weeks so far just going over a chapter at a time, a section at a time, what sort of things she needs to write or not write, or how to punctuate it, or how to frame it on the page, or just talk about what the scene should have in it to help her have it sound like people. And it comes down to, hey, person, could you maybe use fewer commas? But there's also some element of, hey, person, give yourself some credit. Believe in yourself. Don't write this timid. Don't write this anxious, like, oh my God, I need this approval. I have to go try and earn it by writing really good. Give yourself some credit. Give yourself a gold star. Look how far you've come. And I'm very excited by the news that this morning, after talking to her, she just casually announced, the way one does, that her short story that we worked on the first time I talked to her is some finalist in her local state contest. And that's a thing I love hearing. I love seeing, I'm very incredibly proud of some of my clients' success, to hear them have them come to me and say, oh, it's been, I've been working on this book for 6 years and it used to be this and now it's this and then it's this. And now it's finished, and now the sequel to that book is launched, and it's selling well, and it's very successful. I love stories like that. The big challenge I face in all of this is helping a writer be okay with the fact that they're a writer, that they don't know all the rules of grammar. They don't have to know all the rules of grammar. They maybe know how to write. They can put a story together, but it's often missing some stuff. It needs to be polished. It needs to be tweaked. Somebody needs to tell them, hey, this character could use a bit more definition, or hey, this plot's a little weak, or, that's not how a semicolon works. Please stop doing that. And it makes a substantial difference. The challenges are so varied for everybody, but so often there's a thread of anxiety. There's a thread of belief. There's a thread of, am I good enough? Or will this make me legit, as if we're trying to make up for some, like, remember in 6th grade when that kid shoved us down, this will show him I'll sell a book. There's often some thread of that kind of roaming through whatever creative stuff we put together. And it's the solution for it, or the treatment for it, is often different with everybody you talk to. Sometimes it's just, hey, give yourself, be nicer to yourself. And sometimes it's, okay, let's teach you how to make a scene more successfully. And see, you did it. Yeah, you wrote a chapter. This is awesome. Or, hey, you finished this book. You swore to me up and down that you'd never finish anything before. Now you finished a book. That sort of help matters most to me. That's the stuff I can look in the mirror and say, yeah, I love this job. I've been doing this job over 2 decades. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, and please disregard the siren. It is the first Wednesday of the month as we record, and this is Minnesota, so there's a tornado siren testing itself.
No problem.
Outside. But I just for the audience so they can tell that I'm not doing this on purpose. I cannot stop the siren. But anyway, yeah, that's a good answer. I really do enjoy hearing that kind of thing, actually, that kind of deeper dive. Actually, the kind of answer you give that was fantastic. And I've got to say that it's definitely my challenge, and it has been a challenge of mine for a long time, is being timid as a writer, and also, but more recently, was being coy as a writer on the page. Sure. Being coy is such a huge problem for a writer. As well, I mean, obviously, this is speaking from experience. If you're coy as a writer, and this is just my soapbox for a second here, if you step out there and you're not going to tell your reader stuff that basically they just need to know for the story to work, that's kind of what I mean by being coy. Mm-hmm. You're just going to you're not going to tell them anything. You're going to say, you'll pick it up, you'll get it. No, your job is to communicate information. And it's really helpful if you sometimes to just be upfront about it, as the author. Yeah, sometimes you got to play stuff down, but less than most authors think.
But
at least than I thought.
I would I would steer you away, Tim, from the idea of play up and play down. And I would come at this issue of coyness is about a power dynamic. Just like trusting the audience to get it so I don't have to describe it versus the other end of the spectrum, which is giving them, like 2 dump trucks of detail and having them sort through 55 facts to find the 3 they need. It's about a perceived power dynamic that a writer has with their audience. When you hold stuff back, when you're being coy, when you're being the smartest person in the room, and you're sort of making a point of looking for that, what you're really asking for is somebody somewhere, whether it's this audience or somebody who doesn't know about the book, to validate you and say, yeah, good job. I see it. You're smart. You made a thing. Okay, what else you got? When you go the other way and you dump a bajillion things on people, what you're saying is, I don't know if any of this is good. I don't know which part you're going to like. I just have so many things, so I'm going to give them all, and you pick. You tell me what you like, and I'll just keep doing it. And it's that combination of insecurity versus overconfidence that really has to be not broken, because I don't want to make it sound like it's this combative effort, but certainly examined. Because somewhere in between those two things, in that overlap of our Venn diagram, there's the writer's authentic voice. Everybody's got a little bit of that timidity, and everybody's got a little bit of that. I'm an expert. Please recognize my expertise. Whether that expertise is I'm really comfortable in my own story's world because I made it up, or whether that expertise is, no, you don't understand. This is a nonfiction book about rocket science, and I am in fact a rocket scientist. Everybody's some combination of that expertise and anxiety that you're not good enough or that you're wrong or that you don't fit. So finding that overlap is where you sound the most comfortable because you're the least of those things. It's those moments where you're not, holding things back because, they'll figure it out. The plebeians, they'll understand, versus I don't know if I'm good enough, so I'm giving you everything. Everybody's got a different sweet spot.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And finding that sweet spot is done in 2 ways. First, it's done through practice. You have to write more to figure out what your voice sounds like. And 2, it's through vulnerability, which in most cases is going to be marketing. That's the most vulnerable point of an author's outreach, because publishing is essentially marketing. You're asking somebody to say yes to you the same way you're having somebody say yes to you when they buy the book. So that point of vulnerability matters because a lot of people run from it. They write a book up to a certain point and there's some phantom problem. I just don't know. I got to get over this hump. I don't understand. And they find a reason to go back and revise it for the 30th time. Or, if I make this character a redhead, it'll be better. Or, if I make this guy's name Doug, that'll totally fix everything. And they manufacture reasons to not take that step forward. One of the things in coaching that has come up more and more, especially lately, is it's okay to take that step forward. Here's how. You're not stepping out onto some branch that's going to break or that we want to break on purpose just to watch you fail. It's, okay, you've completed this step. It's like following directions. If you were building an IKEA piece of furniture, you can't keep on step 6. Eventually, we have to go to step 7. And you just have to be brave and do it. And if you screw it up, it's not permanent. Just like when you mess up doing something, you can almost always Control Z or try it again or start over or, throw this away and do something else. There's always another way through the problem. Everything is figure outable. So there's no real reason to worry about holding back or over dumping because you'll find your sweet spot over time. You just have to keep going. You won't even find it necessarily in the whole book. It might take 3 books. But that doesn't mean those 3 books you wrote are horrible. They don't need to be like locked away and hidden for all of time. It's just that your evolution as a writer, the definition of your voice took time. For me, defining this voice the way I sound to you right now took like 20 years. That I'm not ashamed of any of the stuff I did in the last, up to that point, but it's totally different than how I sound lately. And you just got to be okay with that because otherwise you're just going to sit there and worry. And I don't want to spend my time worrying.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that kind of reminds me of, you look at any long-running comic strip or comic book even, series like that, and how the look of the characters changes even if it's the same artist over time. That kind of thing is the same with writing, really.
Yeah, it's exactly the same idea.
Goods, yeah.
Yeah, it's not just, oh, well, we started adding pockets to his uniform, or we've made the cape a little bit longer. It's also we fundamentally understood a different thing about how to illustrate. Usually it's in faces. I notice it first in faces. Usually it's, oh, they're drawing the cheeks a different way. Oh, the nose it's a nose, but it's more clearly a nose now than it was 10 issues ago. Or they've, the plot has become a little bit more complex. It used to just be like three panels and then a pun about a dick joke. And now it's starting to migrate into like, oh, there's a story. Oh, yeah. Wow, there's, a compelling story with interconnected issues. There's these two characters doing these two things and this character doing that thing. And, oh, they're really building to a climax. They're really building to a series. That development is natural, and I think it's to be embraced. I don't think it's to be... I mean, I'm sure writers will worry about it. I worry about it all the time when I find out that, oh, I guess I'm going to write this as a blog post today. All right. And you got to lean in once you figure that out rather than lean away. Don't be frightened by it. That's the big takeaway in 22 years. Sometimes it's okay to be uncomfortable, but you still got to do it anyway.
Yeah, and that progression of an artist changing can be rewarding for an audience to watch, actually.
Yeah.
And especially because the people who get really dedicated to a particular series or creator, those people are going to stick around almost regardless of what they produce. I mean, unless you do something really like deliberately off your. I don't even want to say that. I don't think that's not necessarily true. There's some people who are just going to be stick with you for good,
right? If
they like your work enough, and if you can consistently like your work.
Right. And that's just audience building. And all audience building is just building bridges to other people, finding ways that what you create, whatever it is, relates to their lives, whoever they are, somehow, some way at one time, and then doing it consistently. Not always the same way. Like if I'm making something and I always talk about blueberries and you love blueberries, eventually at some point, though, you're going to ask me, hey, John, can we talk about something other than blueberries? And I'd be happy to. Here's a whole list of other things. It's building those relationships is so fundamental, but the first one has to be with yourself. Because so many writers, they read all these books. Oh, I've read this author, and here, have you read this book? I've read that. I read all those. I read these too. And they want to figure out how to sound like those people. I'm incredibly guilty of this. I spent years learning the styles of other people, figuring that if I could sound like another author, or if I could sound like another editor, or if I could do it the way I saw other people do it, then whatever success they were having would automatically photocopy onto me. And that was so not the case. In fact, it was the opposite. I'd get progressively more frustrated. Well, that person writes sentences like this, famous author name here. I can write like that. It's not that difficult to figure out that at every eighth word, that's where they put the comma, or they don't use that many adjectives. Okay. And it doesn't sound like me. And when people come to me and go, hey, John, about this blog post, it was okay. I didn't like it as much as I like this other one. And usually that other one they liked is where I try to sound more like me, more like this. And the aping of other people for the idea of gaining something doesn't help, but it's an easy thing I think we all fall into, because we all want to measure the size of our virtual genitalia. We all want to measure the size, like, I read this, did you read this? If you didn't, I'm better than you. Or have you written this? Have you written this many words in a day? I wrote this many words. It's forever a measuring contest, because all that contest suggests is I would like someone to tell me I did good enough. I would like somebody to tell me, hey, you did good today. Pat on the head, high five, fist bump, have a root beer, whatever your preferred mode of gold star is. And learning your own voice and building a relationship after you learn that voice becomes infinitely easier than trying to force it in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Okay. And that goes for both the marketing and the actual writing of fiction.
Goes for everything. Goes for everything.
Goes for all of it. Yeah.
Because when you find your voice for that book, the best way to tell that story, the best lens to pass the reader through, the best way to bring them along into a scene or multiple scenes or whole stories as an invisible tourist, and you are moving that camera and you are skillfully giving them a story that engages them on an emotional and mental level, that sound is going to stick with them. And when you go to market that book, you will have, because you've written this thing that is engaging, you've written this thing where you've got elements that people clearly liked. I love the scene where the car blows up. I like this scene where they talk. I like this thing or that thing. You can bring those things into the marketing. And now, instead of just describing one more scene with the car blowing up and this and that, now you're talking about the book as a whole. Now you're talking about it in terms of, I wrote this book. I like this book. People like this book. There are cars that blow up. It's kind of cool. Do you like that kind of thing? You should check this out. The authenticity doesn't just stop at the end of the word processor. It doesn't stop at the threshold of marketing. And it isn't only in the marketing, it's everywhere. It's not that you have to, I'm a guy who says dude and so a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And when I write marketing, whether it's for myself or for a client, I tend to write a draft where I put in the so's and ums. I've written dude and son a few times in marketing because I'll just kind of like leave myself a note. But when push comes to shove and I've got to go like do something professional, I made air quotes on a podcast, professional, then I will certainly peel some of those things away, but I'll find a way to, instead of saying dude, I'll just imply it to you.
So you talk, not that you're talking around it, but you say it a different way. But
I find a different way to express it, but it still gets the idea across. So the reader's like, oh, that's John. That's how John sounds. He's just doing it in a bit more formal, a bit more marketing, but not like a bad marketing, but just a different way than like, hey man, how you doing? You want to hang out and like get a Coke? It's cool. Since I can't necessarily always market that way for everything I do, sometimes you have to say, if you'd like to join me for a Coke, I'll be over here at this time. And it's about finding the authenticity, not in the words, but the feeling underneath the words.
All right. Wow, that's fascinating. I can already tell, because we're running low on this part of the show time, that I'm gonna have to have you back at some point, because this has been fascinating just listening to. So I hope you the audience has found it as interesting as I have. I think they will, actually.
I hope so. I'm always happy to come back. You just got to ask. I'm always around. I'm not that difficult to find. I'm always somewhere.
Well, most people are.
That's
on the
true.
other hand,
now that I say that out loud, that's a good point, Tim.
On the other hand, we do have the reading portion of the show. What have you been reading lately?
I read a lot of. All right, so in my day job with coaching, I deal with a ton of fiction. A ton of fiction. I'd say 90-something% of my job is built around people's fiction. So when I actually find time to read myself, I read nonfiction, because I don't have the emotional investment, I don't have the attachment, and it's a bit easier to compartmentalize. So if I'm reading, say, the biography, I listen to it as an audiobook. I listened to the Ehrman Edward narrated Einstein biography. It was like 30-something, 40-something hours long. And it went through it verbalized all the math. So you had to kind of visualize a chalkboard, and it was dense. But I was able to listen to that in bits and pieces, because I might only have like 10 minutes here, 15 minutes here. Maybe if I'm lucky, I'll get 25, because I'll be in between clients, or I'll be, in the car driving somewhere, or there won't be 5 other things going on. So for me, nonfiction, I'm able to compartmentalize. I can listen to something about, the history. I did, there was the history of American brands I recently read, and it was able to go, okay, here's a brand. Here's Kleenex. Here's Band-Aid. A nice little package of about 45 minutes of a chapter. But it was at least a chance for me to take it in pieces. I have a very hard time in my downtime, what downtime I have, going back to fiction, because I find that the mechanism for work doesn't turn off. So looking at text on a page or looking at text on my Kindle is sort of a tricky proposition, because I'll get real picky about it. Like, the editor, I understand the stylistic choice they probably made there, but if you put a comma there and change this word, it probably would read easier, since I'm reading this whole paragraph. So I tend to avoid fiction and lean into comics and nonfiction, preferably in audio, because then I'm less critical of the text, because annoyingly, I can't turn it off. I get real locked in on, why did they say it that way? That's not how I would have said that. The thing to do for that sentence, because it's not cruel. It's not mean. It's just, it's how I see the text. It's how I see the story. So I tend to read a lot of nonfiction. I tend to stay sort of in the audio space. I believe that's the technical bro term. The audio space far more than the text. Currently, I am like an hour and 10 minutes into Lori Gottlieb's Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, the story of a therapist finding a therapist. It's slightly comedic, slightly serious. It's been enjoyable so far. It's a pleasant listen to on my drive, say, to the gym or somewhere. I also digest a ton of biographies, whether they're autobiographies or they're read. Walter Isaacson is amazing at finding detail for things. His books on Einstein, Jobs, and Da Vinci were all 35, 40-hour listens and the most comprehensive sense of a person I've ever had. And it made me want to be a person who left enough notes that someone could write a biography about me. And I sit here and I think, like, what notes did I leave today? Oh, I wrote myself a Post-it note to go to the post office. Oh, there's my reminder to, pick up eggs at the store. Is that really, biography worthy? No, but I didn't write anything else down today. Okay. Writing, I tend to do a lot of nonfiction outside of work.
Nice. Those are some good recommendations. And as for me, I want to say that I am kind of the opposite right now. Although I think nonfiction there's nothing wrong with it, obviously. I do enjoy a good nonfiction book. And actually, I've been rereading, the author's name is on the tip of my tongue. But I mentioned this one before. It's the Pulp Fiction, How to Write Pulp Fiction, I believe was the name of the book.
Yeah.
By, somebody whose name I can't remember. I have the ebook for that. I thought that was fascinating, especially the history of Pulp Fiction and the kind of ideas of, what makes that stuff successful. Because that's kind of my ambition. So I really enjoyed that book. I think I'm not going to try. But I also have a couple of fiction books that I'm reading right now. I just picked up once again on my Kindle the second James Bond novel. I think that's Live and Let Die. So I read Casino Royale at the beginning of the year or earlier this year, and I thought that was really good. Actually, I thought it was a really solid book, and I was very surprised to learn that it was the author's first ever book. Like, apparently Fleming never wrote a book before that, which is kind of fascinating because this one's pretty solid, structurally speaking. He must have been a big reader, or at least had a natural instinct for story back then.
Yeah.
And then I have a much different book from an old pulp James Bond novel. I've got Wonder Boys, which is this by Michael Chabon, which is, of course, a 90s book that I think it's from the 90s. And it is about a writer, and it's literary fiction, which normally I steer clear of, but I like Michael Chabon, and he writes a really fun story. It's very weird. Because his story is like, well, it's set up and there's nothing fun about the premise necessarily, except for unless you're into like emotional angst. But it's just it's written in a fun way.
Wasn't that a movie with Michael Douglas?
Yeah, there was a movie made of it. Yeah.
Okay, that's why that name sticks out to me.
Actually, I heard about someone talking about the movie. I think it was on one of the Ditch Diggers podcasts. Somebody was talking about about the movie, and that got me to pick the book up again because I'd had it sitting on my shelf unopened for a while.
I did that with Inherent Vice. I saw the movie, loved the movie, and someone said, "Oh, the book is great if you love the movie." Sure, it's still sitting in my Audible here. I'm staring right at the screen. I haven't.
Is that one fiction?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe that's the issue then.
Well, it's also really long. It's like 30-something hours, and that's apparently the one reviewer had listed the narrator as a little dry.
Ooh.
And 30 hours with somebody little dry. Like I dated that for a while. No, thank you. I don't need that in my ears anymore.
All right. Well, yeah, and we got there's challenges. I'm not much of an audiobook listener myself. I have a hard time sticking with a book when I can't go at my own pace. And I've been known to skip whole pages when reading any book. So it's hard to do that in audio. I'm not going to just skip forward. That'd be confusing.
Yeah.
As opposed to just skimming down a page, basically just like, okay, I'm going the next one now.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you for being on the podcast, John. We're out of time.
Oh, Tim, it's such a pleasure.
It's been great having you. Tell everybody where they can find your writing coaching and other stuff on the internet.
You can find everything about me, humanly possible, at thewriternextdoor.com. You can also find me. I live on Twitter. I know it's a hellscape. I know it is a dumpster fire of all different kinds of things, but I'm still there. I'm on Twitter holding it down. You can find me on Twitter at awesome, AWESOME _ that's shift in the dash key, JOHN. I'm there all the time. Everything about coaching is up at writernextdoor.com. Everything, the blog's up there. Everything I do goes on that website.
Well, excellent. And, of course, you can find my books at Amazon.com. Most of them are exclusive right now, including the new book, Demon Scroll, which has been out a week or so as of this, actually less than a week as of this episode airing. So, yeah, thanks for checking all that stuff out. You can still get the Mangrove Suite for free. That's my little cyberpunk novella, and you can get that wherever fine ebooks are downloaded. And you can also get the first 10 Liars book, Ilsa in Blue, wherever ebooks are found. So thanks for listening, everybody, and have a good one. Bye.
That tears it.